This is part 7 of the Delta 7-inch motor-driven bench grinder rebuild series. If you haven't seen part 6, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we're going to be cleaning up and then painting the Quinch Cup and then assembling the Twin-Lites. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. So I soaked the hell out of this cup, but the inside of it is still just nasty as all get out. So here I'm just using some various wire brushes on a drill to really try to clean that out of there. There's even still paint left in there, but there's like layers upon layers upon layers, and then there was like entire metal pieces I had to chip out of there. After I got all that cleaned up, I went ahead and primed the cup, and so I primed the outside first and then I flipped it over and primed the inside. And to get all that primer down inside that small hole that the mount goes into, it got a lot of the primer on the outside around it. So I'm just using a paper index card to scrape off some of that primer and kind of even out that surface. While it's wet, it'll self-level since this is metal etching primer, so I can just recoat it lightly and it'll level out there and you won't even know that I did that. And then we'll go ahead and prime the entire outside of it. To show you how much I got cleaned up on it. It looks a lot better now. There you go. So, boy, that was probably the hardest thing to clean on this whole grinder. A lot of times the inner wheel covers will be just caked on the inside with debris from the being ground off of whatever people were grinding. And that stuff can be real fun to get out of there as well. And after we primed it, we went ahead and shot it with that machinery gray. Same color we used for the entire project. It's a gouache machinery gray, I believe. So one of the things that was missing for this project was light reflectors that go inside the Twin-Lites. My first plan was to use basically the inside of an aluminum can since it's already curved and all of that, but that didn't work out so well. So plan B was to fabricate some from a sheet of aluminum. This is the same stuff that I used to make, or used to use to make the stator bands on motors. But yeah, so we needed to make a template first, and we're just going to use a piece of paper to make that. So you can see the vents inside the Twin-Lite, and that's because the incandescent bulbs used to give off a lot of heat. And these light reflectors were also functioning as kind of a heat shield. And we're going to be using LED bulbs in this build, but I still wanted to make these because it'll help reflect that light down onto the work surface. So there are two little notches on each, or two little tabs on each side that I need to notch out of the template. And I'm just marking that. And after we got that done, we needed to go ahead and polish up that aluminum. So I wet sanded it with 400, 600, 800, and 1000 grit. Rinse between each grit. And then I applied the Mother's Mag and aluminum polish to it. And then we're going to buff that off of there. Now, if I'd spent a little more time, I could have gotten like a mirror finish on this, but you know, they're just light shields. It's not like it's, you know, going to ever be seen by anybody or anything like that, but I wanted to do a halfway decent job on it. And this aluminum polish stuff is just magic. So we got a pretty good shine on there, pretty good reflectivity, and that's really all we need. It's just something that's going to reflect that light down onto the work surface. So next we just trace out the template onto the aluminum, and then we're going to cut those out. Just use some tin snips. And obviously this is going to be really sharp, so be careful not to cut yourself if you're doing this. After I got them cut out, I stacked them all on top of each other and kind of just held them in place and took them over to the belt sander and kind of evened them all out. So here they are after I did the belt sanding. And the edges on them are kind of rough, so we're going to hit that with some 220 grit. Just knock down that little lip that developed on them. Then we're going to clean them up with some rubbing alcohol, and this will remove the Sharpie and any of the remaining polishing compound. So next I'm going to shape these, and the way I'm doing that is I've got this piece of, I think it's like 1.25 inch rod. Might be 1.5 inch, I don't remember exactly. And then I've got like a piece of 3-inch webbing. I'm just wrapping that around it, and then I'm going to use a pair of needle nose pliers to kind of just crank down the webbing. And you see how that starts to get it to conform to the pipe or to the rod. And then we'll just tap the outer edges of it with this brass hammer, and that'll shape it. There may have been a better way to do this, but it's how I was doing it. I was kind of figuring it out as I went along on how I wanted to do this. So once we got one of them shaped, we're going to test fit that sucker. And they have a tendency to lean to the left or to the right and not go in there perfectly straight on. So I had to kind of play with it a little bit to get it to go in there where it was lined up properly. Once it's in there, it's wedged in there pretty good. It ain't coming out of there, from vibration or anything. Plus there will be a light socket and a bulb sitting as we're looking at it on top of it. But after I finished that first one, I went ahead and shaped the other three. And we can go ahead and install that second one in this first Twin-Lite. So sometimes those notched areas, they had a little bit of debris in them, and I just got a needle file and cleaned them out after we got that second one in there. And we're done with one of the Twin-Lites. And we go ahead and put the other two in the second Twin-Lite. And next we're going to install the glass, the eye shield. So this is the original glass. It cleaned up pretty good. So you could replace this with plexiglass, but this is windshield glass. I mean, it's pretty thick. It's like a little bit thicker than 1/4 inch. So, and I believe it's got like anti-shatter coating on both sides of it. And these are the spring clips that hold it in place. And there's a little slot in the back there that the clip engages with. So you can just grab the front of it with some pliers, push it back, and then push down on it. And it'll drop into that slot, no problem at all. And then the front piece will lock on where that little step is on it. If that made any sense whatsoever. In any case, they hold those eye shields in there pretty damn good. So we'll do the same thing for the other one. Next, the wiring. Boy, oh boy. Let me tell you, whatever electrical tape they were using in the 1930s is just absolute ridiculous. So this is newer electrical tape that was on there. We can pull that off and then undo those two wire nuts. But that electrical tape that's actually holding the Y part of the wiring together is just ridiculous. So we got two wires that come out of there. And I marked the one that was going to the white, but I'm not sure that it really matters. You've got this piece of shielding on here that, or heat shrink that I guess was just gathering those wires. But I just went ahead and cut that sucker off of there. So this is that ridiculous 1930s fabric-based electrical tape that I guess it just melts and turns into a solid. It's just, I mean, I basically had to crack this stuff off of there. And the way that these wires are all connected is each one of them has a loop terminal on the end of it, and then there was a screw that goes through it and a nut on the other end. And then to add insult to injury, they solder all three of those loop terminals together before they ever run the screw through them. So getting them apart was a real pain in the butt. I probably could have, and I eventually did on the other light, just cut all those loop terminals off and install new ones. But yeah, I spent probably 30 minutes trying to mess with all that at one point. So here we got a new piece of 14-3 wire. And this is basically just leftover power cord when I cut power cords kind of short for motors that mount on drill presses. So I'm just cutting away the shielding here. And then we're going to line up those loose wires to make sure that we have enough to be able to wire everything. And we definitely don't need that much ground. And I am going to ground both of these Twin-Lites. I don't even remember if I grounded them on my other Delta grinder, but I'm going to ground them on this one. So next we're just going to clean up the light receptacles. This is just electrical contact cleaner, CRC. You can get it Home Depot, Lowe's, all the big box stores. Ace Hardware carries it as well. And after we got those cleaned up as best they're going to get, we're going to go ahead and figure out our wiring here. We're just using the original wiring as a kind of a template so that we know how long these wires need to be, and we can cut those. And then we're going to put loop terminals on that black wire and the white wire. There are different size loop terminals. You want to make sure that whatever terminal you use is big enough for the screw to go through it. I want to say it was like an 832 screw. I don't remember exactly. Might have been a 632, but no big deal. So let's crimp that terminal on there. I'm sure there's some overachievers out there that'll solder that sucker before they bother to crimp it, but So after I've got all the wiring connected, then I'm going to go ahead and wrap each one of those 3-wire connections with electrical tape. Modern day electrical tape that doesn't turn into a solid. You could probably use like paint on electrical tape if you wanted to as well, but boy, won't that be fun to get off of there. So here we go, and now we've got a loop terminal on the ground as well, so we're just going to install the 2 light sockets, and they just drop into slots. And then we're going to route our wiring, make sure everything is going to fit in there without obstructing any of the screws that hold the wire cover on or the main screw that holds the Twin-Lite on. If we're good on all that, then we're going to go ahead and install a hog ring or a hog loop, whatever you want to call it, on the shielded part of the main wire. And this acts as a wire stress relief and prevents the wire from being pulled out of whatever it's inside of. That's probably overkill on this because there is a wire clamp that you screw down that holds this wire in place, but I'm doing it regardless. Next, we're going to go ahead and connect the ground. So you can see those 2 screw holes right at the very edge, and there's the cover, which we painted black along with a bunch of other parts. And we're just going to attach the loop terminal to one of the screws and screw it in place. Next, the worker installs a second screw. Never realized how much my videos are like how it's made. So we'll just make sure those suckers are really in there good, and that wire is not going anywhere. And the ground should be really good. So all right, and we're just going to do a little routing. Next, we'll install the LED bulbs. I just bought these off of Amazon. They're the same ones I used in my other grinder. They're very bright. They work like a champ. And then finally we can go ahead and install the wire cover. So I've already stuck the, there's a plastic rod in the center there that kind of routes that screw and keeps it from abrading the wiring inside there. But it's protruding too high right now, and that's because one side of it is a little bit more expanded than the other. So I needed to pull it out and flip it over. and then just make sure it's really seated in there. So there is a very, very small lip that this wiring cover kind of rides in. And there you go. So once you've got it, you can tighten it down. There's 3 long screws that do this, and all 3 of them are the same size, so you don't have to worry about getting them mixed up or anything like that. And after we get this light cover on, we'll do all of the same steps for the other Twin-Lite. There's no difference. They're exactly the same. There's no left or right. They're basically duplicate copies of each other. Getting that second screw lined up is kind of a pain in the butt, but there you go. Then we'll throw that center one in. But I think the Twin-Lites turned out really good. You know, we'll find out how the rest of it turns out as we get to it. But that's going to wrap up this video. So like I said, we'll do the exact same steps for the other Twin-Lite. No reason to duplicate and show you all of that, but it's the same thing. And in the next video, we will be assembling the grinder. So I hope you enjoyed this. Hope you learned something. If you did, please like and subscribe. If you got any questions, post them in the comments section. As always, I appreciate the support, and I will see you next time.